Hello, everyone. Let's start the class with a prayer. Om. Om. Sahana Bhavatu. Sahanao Bhunaktu. Sahaviryam Karavavahai. Tejasvinavaditamastu ma Vishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Small is mighty. You see in the example of microprocessors. Microprocessors are such small things. It controls so much information. You understand? All your computers, televisions, everything is run with those small microprocessors. Similarly, nuclear explosion. How is nuclear explosion done? The nuclei, they come together. You can't see the nucleus. It's small, it's mighty. That's why they say dynamite comes in small sizes. Sometimes you see short people, they're very mighty. So they say dynamite comes in small sizes. So the self is the smallest, is the mightiest. You can't see the self is subtler than the subtlest, smaller than the smallest, but is also mightier than the mightiest. It's all to do with your identification. If you identify with it, you derive the power from it. So, where do you get power in life? You get power through your identification. See, suppose a person only identifies with himself or herself, you don't feel so powerful. But if you can expand your identification and identify with your family, you feel your whole family is behind you. You identify with your community, you feel your whole community is behind you. You identify with the country, you feel the whole country is behind you. The greater the identification, the more powerful you feel. See, as students of Vedanta, when you're all learning this subject, in the back of the mind, if you remind yourself what we are learning today has been learned by thousands and thousands of people in the past. Great souls, great masters have learned the same knowledge and got self realization. I'm also learning this knowledge today. So, if you can identify with the galaxy of students and galaxy of sages in the past, you feel so much more powerful when you're reading this knowledge. You're part of a much wider group. Otherwise, you feel, oh, I am sat somewhere in Manchester in one house, in one lane, and I'm reading this philosophy. You understand? You feel isolated. But if you identify with the larger group, you feel stronger. Strength comes through identification. The child identifies with its father or mother. That's why when two children are fighting, the child will say, I am going to tell my father. The father will come and beat you up. I'm going to tell my mother will come and beat you up. See, because they identify with the father or the mother, they derive the strength from that. So if you identify with your body is changing all the time. You identify with your mind and intellect is changing all the time. You identify with the self is changeless. You become all powerful. You become Caesar, Caesar. See, that's the secret of a Christ. That's the secret of a Krishna or a Muhammad. Where did they get the power from? Can you imagine the whole world forsake Christ? They crucified him for no fault of his. Can you imagine the humiliation? And what did Christ do? He just smiled. Coolly smiled. He said, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. So where did he get that strength from? From the self. Because he identified with the self within. See, it's all given in a very symbolic manner. Father in heaven. In the Bible, they call it Father in heaven. In the Bhagavad Gita, they call it Brahman. It's the same thing. The concept is the same. It's just presented in a different way. You identify, ultimately what they mean is the self within, the Atman within. So instead of relying on external sources for power, rely on yourself. Others' opinion. Why are we concerned about others' opinions? Some of the children go through mental health problems because of online abuse. They do abuse online. Why do you care? Don't look into that. You derive your strength from within yourself, not from external sources. So once you develop that conviction in your thinking, you believe in your thinking and you develop conviction in that, then you can stand up. You can stand up for a cause. Rosa Parks, she didn't get out of the seat. She stood for that cause. What gave her the strength? The strength is conviction. Mahatma Gandhi, he stood for the cause. So once you have decided to something, stick to it. Interesting thing is, once you develop conviction, there will be obstacles. So if you are facing obstacles, means you are doing the right thing. You are on the right track. All great people faced obstacles. The interesting examples are given in the parables. How some of these great people, they were ready to forsake their own loved ones for the sake of the cause. The one is to stand up to people externally. Greater than that is to sacrifice your own people for the sake of the cause. Yudhishthira forsake his wife for the sake of cause. Mirabai forsake her husband for the sake of the cause. She wanted enlightenment. So she went beyond her husband. Very, very interesting parables again. Different relationships. Mahabali forsake his own guru to follow the truth. Prahalada forsake his father because he wanted to pursue enlightenment. Father said no. He left his father and went. No, I'm not suggesting you all leave your families and go. I'm only giving example. Where will you go? I don't have any place to house you all. You understand? So we don't have to leave anybody. It's not that anybody, it's just a manner of conveying a principle. It's more figurative than literal. So the strength of the conviction, your conviction should be so strong that you depend on yourself rather than others. Oh, my manager did not give me an appraisal. Oh, therefore I'm depressed this weekend. You understand? Manager doesn't give you appraisal. What does the manager know about your work? So why are you dependent on somebody else's appraisal? You know how much you're putting into the work. What neighbor says, what Uber driver says. You're going based on what others. Some comment somebody puts online on social media. How? What do they know? They know nothing. So have faith in yourself. That's where you develop the strength from. So small is mighty. The self is the smallest, is the mightiest. That's what Oppenheimer, he quotes the Gita. In the nuclear bomb he discovered, he quoted the Bhagavad Gita. I become death, the destroyer of worlds. The next topic in this book is path of reality. So we are on this chapter, which is talking about the states of consciousness. We're coming to the end of this chapter. The three states of consciousness: waking, dream, and deep sleep. And beyond the three states is a fourth state, which no one has experienced, except a select few who have realized the self. So these states of consciousness explains whether you are experiencing the reality or you're still caught up in the illusion. If you're experiencing waking, dream, and deep sleep, you're still in the illusion. If you're in the fourth state, you're experiencing the reality, state of self realization. Now, the path of reality, spiritual path, the moment the word path is given, it indicates you need to go somewhere. Path to reality means you've got to go to find that reality. But the irony is that the self is within you. The scriptures declare that you are the self. That God principle is within each one of us. So, where are you going to find that? It's already there. You are that. So, if you look at it in that way, there is no path. You understand? You are the self. You are that Atman. Now, what they mean by path means to remove the ignorance. And once you remove the ignorance, you understand, you realize you are the self. So, path to reality, the spiritual path is removal of ignorance, not the gaining of the self. You can't gain the self because you are the self. How can you gain something which you already have? But you don't know that you are the self. See, that is the difference between a saint and a sinner. The difference between the saint and the sinner is the difference between a new brass vessel and an old brass vessel. So you go to the store and purchase a new brass vessel, which is bright and shiny. You have one in storage in a garage. You have a brass vessel, which is old one, which is oxidized, is black and tarnished. What is the difference between this new shiny brass vessel and the old one, which is black and tarnished? It's just the coating of oxide. That's all. So instead of buying the new brass vessel, what should you have bought? You should have bought Brasso. That's all. You understand? If you had bought Brasso and bring the Brasso home and applied the Brasso to the old brass vessel and you give it a good rub, remove all that, and then take another clean piece of cloth and remove all the residue. Then you take another cloth and shine it. Or what will you get? Nice, shiny brass vessel, as if it is brand new. The question is, did Brasso bring the shine? The manufacturers of Brasso will claim that. Advertising standards may object to it. But the Brasso claims, oh, bring shine to the vessel. It's not true. Brasso doesn't bring shine to the vessel. Shine is inherent in the vessel. It's been covered with oxide. All that Brasso does is to remove that oxide. The shine which is inherent is revealed. You're not bringing shine into the vessel. You're only removing the oxide which is preventing you from seeing the shine. Similarly, you are not realizing the self. You're not bringing the self out. You're not bringing God out. God is there. Self is there. You're only removing the ignorance that is preventing you from seeing it. So that's the difference between a saint and a sinner. What is the difference? Saint has no ignorance. He has knowledge of the self. Sinner is ignorant of the self. But the self is there in both the saint and the sinner. God you are, self you are. Even the worst of criminals. The self is there, God is there. Emerson, the American philosopher, he remarked, every man is God playing the fool. Every human is God playing the fool. What he meant is God plus desires is human. So when we say ignorance, what is ignorance? Ignorance again sounds a very abstract term. Ignorance, how do you know that you're ignorant? Find out how many desires you have. The more desires you have, quantity wise, and grosser desires you have, quality wise, you're more in ignorance. So, two things you got to work on. In fact, they go together. You have to improve the quality of your desires from gross to subtle, from subtle to subtlest. Gross desires are selfish. Convert your selfish desires to subtler. What is subtler desires? Unselfish desires. They are still desires, but more refined. And then subtler unselfish desires, you change it to the subtlest, selfless. So as you improve the quality of desire, the quantity reduces. See, when you have selfish desires, there's maximum desires, like the bottom of a pyramid. If you imagine a pyramid, a triangle, the bottom, the base is widest. As it gets to the top, it becomes narrow and narrow and narrow and narrow. So the base of the pyramid is selfish desires, gross desires. I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that, I want this. So the mind keeps on pitching up various selfish desires, plenty of selfish desires. But the moment you fix a higher ideal and convert these selfish to unselfish desires, it starts narrowing. The quantity keeps reducing. The moment you think in terms of your family, you're ready to sacrifice your desires for the sake of your family. You understand? So the moment you fix a higher ideal, your desires reduce. You think of community, your desires reduce further. Think of country, your desires reduce further. So more and more unselfish the ideals become, the less and less are your desires. A person who's a soldier who's fighting for his country is ready to sacrifice his own life for the sake of the country. He's ready to give up all. How come? Because he's inspired, he's fired by that higher ideal. The Tale of Two Cities. Sidney Carton gives his life to save another person. A remarkable act. In fact, nobody knew that he gave his life except the readers. We are reading the book. Only we know it. Nobody else knows it in the book. He doesn't advertise. Nobody knows. Until he's dead, after that only people come to know. It's so inspiring. He just goes to the prison and exchanges himself for that prisoner. That's what he does. And a prisoner, see, the story is, for those who don't know, this Tale of Two Cities is, what are the two cities? London and Paris. Those are the two cities. So this is during the time of the French Revolution. The aristocracy, the aristocrats in France are being caught by the masses. The masses have taken over and they are guillotining. They're all being guillotined. The aristocrats have been guillotined. They've all been put in prison. So what they have done is not only the aristocrats, but also the servants, the workers who are working for the aristocrats, they imprisoned them also, which is not fair. You understand? Okay, aristocrats you imprison. Why should you imprison the workers? So this guy, Charles Darnay, he belongs to the family of aristocrats. He's in England. And that is the time the French Revolution breaks out in France. And here's this news that his servants have been put in jail. So he goes back to France to free the servants, knowing fully well he's an aristocrat. So as soon as he enters France, what they do is they imprison him and put him in jail because they know that he's an aristocrat. It's stupid of him to do that, but with all good intention, he did it to protect his own servants. Sidney Carton, he knew this. He knew this guy has done this. He felt sorry for him. He said, he's done it for a good cause, but he's in prison. In prison means what? Another week's time, he'll be guillotined. He'll be killed. That's all. So what Sidney Carton does is he goes to Paris. Voluntarily, he goes. And he has a reputation for being drunk, Sidney Carton. So what he does is he goes in the carriage and he's stopped by the customs, the immigration in France, and he's acting as if he's drunk, and he's put a little bit of liquor all over him. Yeah, I love the drink in France. That's why I've come to France. You guys make excellent drink. So they all laugh and say, listen, during the time of the revolution, you're coming for drinks, is it? Anyway, you come. You understand? So they know his reputation. He enters the country like that. Same thing he does to get into the prison. He puts all the liquor on him and pretends as if he's drunk, and he says, I want to meet this prisoner. He's a client of mine. And he goes into the cell. And whose cell is it? Charles Darnay's cell. And what he does is he asks Charles Darnay to write a letter. And as he's sitting down to write a letter, he puts smelling salts, and Charles Darnay collapses. He faints. Quickly, he changes the clothes. He takes the prisoner's clothes, puts his clothes onto Charles Darnay, and he tells the jailer, hey, this guy who's come to visit, he's fainted. Take him out, take him out. They take him out. They think this guy anyway came drunk. That's why he's fully fainted now. You understand? So they remove the wrong person. They're removing the prisoner. And he's already arranged for the carriage to take Charles Darnay back to England. So Charles Darnay is out. He doesn't know he's been even saved. He's out on his way. And Sidney Carton is there in jail. And next morning, he's taken and he's guillotined. And that is the time the book ends with the famous lines. He says, it's a far, far greater thing I do than I've ever done before. It's a far, far greater rest I go to than I've ever had. Charles Dickens explains what is unselfishness. It's a far, far better thing I do than I've ever done before. The moment you start serving, you start giving, you start thinking about others, he says, it's a far, far better thing you'll do. The far, far greater rest I go to than I've ever known. Very happily, he goes and gives his life. No self pity. So that's the difference. To make your desires subtler. And when you make it subtler, the quantity also reduces. So that's how you reduce your ignorance. That's how you remove ignorance. So limitation is created by your desires. You have to make your desires subtler and subtler. See, two problems people face in life. One is worldly attachments. We are all aware of that. Any one of you all will say that, yes, I understand that. So attachment to family, attachment to friends, attachment to work, worldly attachments. Now, what is interesting is in the Isavasya Upanishad, there is a mantra, and in that mantra he says, those who are attached to spiritual path, spiritual practices, are in greater darkness. See, when you are attached to the world, what is the solution to get out of that attachment? To turn spiritual. When you turn spiritual, you get out of your worldly attachments. In the Isavasya Upanishad, he says, attachment to spiritual practices is greater darkness, is worse. And you wonder, why should I become spiritual? Why should I get into the spiritual path if that is going to lead me to greater darkness? He does not say spiritual path is greater darkness. Attachment to spiritual path. It's very interesting what he's saying there. See, what he's saying there is that if you are attached to the world, to worldly things, you can get out of that attachment by turning spiritual. But if you get attached to the spiritual things itself, how are you going to get out of it? So the advice is to not that does not mean you don't turn spiritual. That does not mean you don't do spiritual activities. Of course, you do spiritual activities, but ensure you don't get attached to them. You maintain the focus on the goal. For what purpose am I doing the spiritual activities? Is to get to the self. When you're doing karma yoga, why are you doing karma yoga? Is to get to the self. But if you get attached to the pleasure that you get out of karma yoga, oh, I get so much joy when I help others. I get so much satisfaction when I serve others. You're getting attached to the pleasure that you're getting out of service. That is the problem. The problem is the attachment to the pleasure. Of course, you get the pleasure. There's nothing wrong in getting the pleasure. But your focus is not on the pleasure. Your focus is on whether I'm getting to the self or not. So as long as you maintain focus on the goal, you don't get attached to the pleasure that you get out of the yogas. Same thing in bhakti yoga. Devotion gives you tremendous pleasure. Bhakti, you get into realms where you can forget yourself, you can forget the world. So much pleasure you'll get into. But then you forget the goal. Why you're practicing devotion? To get to the self. Same with Jnana Yoga, knowledge. If you just keep on analyzing the scriptures, great pleasure you get. But for what purpose am I doing it? So as long as you're aware of the purpose, you don't get attached to the pleasure that you're getting out of these practices. So attachment to the world is darkness, blinding darkness. Andam tama. Tama means darkness. Tamas means darkness. Andam tama means blinding darkness. Is attachment to the world. Attachment to spiritual path is greater darkness. So these are the two impediments. Attachment to worldly activities, number one. But if you cross the attachment to worldly activities, number two is you can get attached to spiritual practices. So there again, you've got to be alert. Find out what's happening in the world. Maximum problems are being caused because of attachment to religions. In the name of religion, wars are being fought. Massacre is being committed. So it's not religion which is the problem, it's attachment to religion. So attachment to spiritual practices does greater harm. I know it's not a good advertisement for a spiritual path, but it's a fact. We're only analyzing the facts. See, anything which is subtler, the danger is greater. You understand? See, walking on the road, what danger is there? You understand? The moment you get onto a car, you get onto a flight, get onto a rocket, the danger gets compounded more and more. So when it becomes subtler, the dangers are more. Now, that doesn't mean you don't take that up. So you do take it up, but you follow the procedure carefully so that you can minimize the risks. So the path to reality is that is not gaining the self. You're not gaining God, but only removing the ignorance that is preventing you from gaining it. So you are the self, you are that reality. So to remove these vasanas and desires, the yogas are given. The purpose of the yogas is to remove that ignorance, get rid of the vasanas, get rid of desires. We're going to study that in the next chapter, the yogas. In detail, we're going to go through one by one what is karma yoga, what is bhakti yoga, jnana yoga, hatha yoga, all that we're going to cover. But what is given in this chapter, at the end of the chapter, is a poem which brings together all these yogas. Many of you all would have read the poem, but you wouldn't have understood this is the significance of that poem. And the poem is none other than the Daffodils by William Wordsworth, a popular poem. I think all of you know this poem. But what you wouldn't have known is that the three yogas are inbuilt in that poem. So let's read that poem. I'll read out that poem and then I'll explain how to interpret that poem in the light of the spiritual path. So, 1 minute, we'll bring up the poem. Are there? So, if you were to see any selection of Wordsworth's poems, this poem will feature in that. The Daffodils. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. So Wordsworth is in Lake District. He's looking at a sea of daffodils in front of him, and he's composing this poem. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. Beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze, continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. So he's saying there were so many flowers, He's saying 10,000 saw I at a glance. Oh, sorry. Where is it? 10,000 saw at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. Jocund means a joyful company. How can a poet not be happy in such a joyful company? I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. For oft, when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. They flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. William Wordsworth. See, I've told you the three yogas are there. I've read out the poem. Still, it will be difficult for you to locate it. You understand? You must still be wondering where are the three yogas here. But daffodils, he's talking about cloud, he's talking about. Where is the three yogas? So, in fact, interesting thing is sometimes people ask, how do you know that Wordsworth meant it? So you read the poem, how do you know Wordsworth meant it? It seems to be put in so perfectly that it fits in, every single aspect of it fits in. Whether he meant it or not doesn't matter. You understand? Suppose he didn't mean it, doesn't matter. We are able to derive something out of it. But in all probability, he'd have meant it because it fits in so beautifully. So when I explain it, you'll appreciate it also. So he starts off the first line, I wandered lonely as a cloud. In fact, in some of the old poem books, the title of the poem is the first line. I wandered lonely as a cloud. That will be the title. So if you look for daffodils, you may not find daffodils. This will be the title, the first line. I wandered lonely as a cloud. Cloud, in this context, gives an example of perfect sacrifice, highest form of sacrifice. And what is that? Is to give yourself away. What does a cloud do? It gives rain. And in giving rain, what happens to the cloud? The cloud disappears. So Wordsworth is saying, how should you give? You should give, and you give everything away. That is highest service, highest sacrifice. So you're giving as a cloud. What does that indicate? It's very simple. Which of the yogas does it indicate?
Karma yoga?
Karma yoga, isn't it? Karma yoga. Correct. See, seem to indicate karma yoga. I'm giving as a cloud, service and sacrifice. The spirit of karma yoga. I wandered lonely. So, wandering means detachment. So you're not fixed to a place. You're wandering means you're detached and you're lonely. You're self-sufficient. You're not attached to a group of people. A group of people also wander from one city to another city, but is attachment. So he says, no, you're wandering lonely. You're detached in a spirit of self-sufficiency. You're self-sufficient. You're on your own and you're detached. And you're giving and serving and helping others. So that is Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is a combination of all these qualities. You're detached, you're self-sufficient, and you're helping others. See, some people help others because they're dependent on others. Like people who have pets, they get more out of the pets than what they give to the pet. You understand? You get more when you give. So he says, no, you're giving not because you need it. You're giving because you want to give others. So you're self-sufficient. So the first line, starting shot, is Karma Yoga. I wandered lonely as a cloud. Straight away he starts off Karma Yoga. The result of Karma Yoga is given in the second line, that floats on high over vales and hills. Valleys and hills indicates the ups and downs of life. So the ups and downs of life, you are floating above it, meaning you're not affected by the fluctuations. When you do Karma Yoga, you're not dependent upon the world. Pairs of opposites in the world don't affect you. When all at once, he's continuing the third line, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host, and he puts a comma after host, a host, comma, of golden daffodils. If there are English teachers in this classroom, they will say it's a mistake, a grammatical mistake. You understand? How can you put a comma? And this Wordsworth. There's a comma. This in the original, there's a comma. You go to the original version, there's a comma. It's not that Wordsworth doesn't know grammar. He knows exactly what grammar is. He takes poetic license. So what Wordsworth is explaining is that comma indicates the gush of joy that you feel when you do service. So he's composing himself. So there's a pause, a host. Comma is indicating the pause of golden daffodils. So he's registering the pleasure that he's getting. That is bhakti. So bhakti, devotion is connected to karma, service. So when you serve, automatically you develop that spirit of devotion. A host, golden daffodils. That's how you should read it. A host of golden daffodils. No, incorrect. A host, pause. Just take a pause of golden daffodils. Beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Now is Bhakti Yoga. So first is Karma Yoga he starts off with. Then that feeling of joy, that gushing of emotion is Bhakti Yoga. And in the next few lines, he is reveling in that pleasure, in that bhakti, in that devotion. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched a never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. He's identifying with the daffodils. He's also dancing along with them. Identification is devotion. See, those who identify with flowers, some of them, they take an interest in flowers. They identify with the flowers. That house which has roses, which house? See, if you don't have a identification with flowers, you don't know which, you don't notice roses. So when you identify, you notice it. So he's noticing the daffodils because he's identifying. 10,000 saw at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. See, the interesting part is not the company, it's not the daffodils which is cheerful and light-hearted. Jocund means cheerful, light-hearted, fun-loving. It's not the daffodils. You're projecting it upon the daffodil. You're light-hearted. You're fun-loving. You're projecting it upon the daffodils. That is bhakti. That is devotion. And then the next two lines indicates the third yoga, knowledge. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. I gazed and gazed. So, Jnana Yoga is thinking, is probing, is analyzing, is inquiring. So, again, when you listen to it again and again, you say, okay, what have I not learned from it? Can I probe further into it? Can I squeeze something out of it? Again and again, you're going back to it. I gazed and gazed. You learn that when you see how they make sugarcane juice in India. Huh? You go to the streets in India, they have sugarcane. I don't know whether to recommend that for you all because then you'll say I picked up some germs from that water because they don't use bottled water. But the taste is so good. So the way they do it, they put that sugarcane first into that thing. It's got two wheels rotating, which squeezes the sugarcane. So they put the sugarcane. Then from that end, again they put that same sugarcane. Third time they put it, fourth time. You wonder what juice will come out of it. Fifth time they're putting, sixth time they're putting, again and again they keep putting, again juice is coming. You wonder what is left in that sugarcane for the juice to come. You understand? They keep putting again and again. So that's exactly how you should approach knowledge. Every time you listen to these concepts, squeeze it a little more, squeeze a little more. It is there. You just have to squeeze it, it'll come. So that's what he's saying. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. I didn't realize so much wealth I'm getting out of it. I didn't realize that. But so Jnana Yoga gives you that confidence in life. It gives you that encouragement in life. The more and more you think about it, more and more you learn it. So these are the three yogas he's given. Then the last verse in Daffodils, he talks about meditation and self-realization. For oft, when on my couch I lie. For oft, when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, that is meditation. Vacant or pensive. Vacant to the thoughts of the world, pensive upon the thoughts of reality. Pensive means you're thinking about it. So almost it's opposite, vacant, pensive. Vacant to the world, pensive to the reality. Vacant or in pensive mode is indicating meditation. Meditation is you're cutting off from the world, you're thinking of the self alone. So after the three yogas, you get to the stage of meditation. And if you maintain that last thought in meditation, what happens? They flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. The last thought disappears and you hit the self. They flash upon that inward eye. Inward eye means jnana chakshu. Wordsworth has borrowed it from the Upanishads. Jnana Chakshu. Jnana Chakshu is indicated as the third eye of Lord Shiva. Inward eye, the eye of wisdom. So inward eye means you develop a perception which is beyond the two eyes. You see something beyond the two eyes, which means the self. You achieve self-realization. They flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. He's become one with the daffodils. Daffodils indicates divinity. It indicates the self. It's all pervading. You become one with that all pervading. Become one with the self. For when oft upon my couch. Now that doesn't mean next class all of you are on your couch. I switch on the video, all of you, like Vishnu, nicely relaxing like this on the couch. Converse is not true. Just because relaxing the couch doesn't mean you'll achieve enlightenment. What he means is it doesn't matter whether you sit or stand or sleep. It matters where is your focus. That's what he's saying. So you could be lying on the couch, but your focus is on the self. For oft when upon my couch I lie in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. You are on your own and you're reveling in the bliss of the self. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with it afterwards. Incredible, how beautifully it fits in. Line by line, it just fits exactly into the spiritual part. See, this is how you learn. When you look at different things in life, you've got to apply this knowledge and learn from it. It could be music, it could be literature. And turn it spiritual. So this poem leads us into the yogas, which is the next chapter. It almost prepares you, gives you the base for the next chapter. That's it. So any questions you can ask in the next class. Make a list of questions and I'll take it up. Think about it. Go through the poem. See if there's anything which is not clear to you. And we can always analyze it later. Sandhya, is there any announcement?
No announcement today, Bhaskarji. Thank you.
When we have time, no announcement. When we have no time and there are many questions, there are many announcements also. Huh? What to do now? Life's like that. Okay. So you're all free to go. All right, everyone. Guru.
Namaskar.
Thank you, Bhaskarji.
Thank you, Bhaskar.
Hari Om.
Thank you, Bhaskarji.
Hari Om. Thank you.
Hari Om. Thank you, Bhaskarji. Hari Om.
Hari
Thank
Om.
you.
Guru, next week we'll take the question.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Bhaskarji.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhaskarji. Thank you, Bhaskarji.
Thank you, Bhaskarji. Thank you.